The galaxy believed humanity was extinct. From the polished halls of the Galactic Tribunal to the war councils of alien empires, the declaration was final: Earth was gone, and its people nothing more than cosmic dust. The official records stated that the last of the Terran forces had been annihilated. No resistance. No survivors. No threat. It was a lie. Beneath the shattered ruins of old Manhattan, hidden under layers of collapsed skyscrapers and forgotten subway tunnels, Earth's last stronghold still breathed. In the flickering glow of outdated monitors and war-scarred holograms, Commander Adrian Voss stood at the center of humanity's last hope, a bunker deep underground, where the Resistance had spent the last decade preparing for this moment. The Galactic Tribunal's fleet had arrived. 1,000 warships cast shadows across the broken planet, blotting out the stars as they descended. Cruisers armed with plasma lances. Carriers releasing drone swarms like a black tide. An executioner's blade, falling slow but certain. Voss watched the enemy formations on the tactical display, his expression carved from stone. The Tribunal thought this was a clean-up mission, the final sweep to erase the embers of a dead species. They had no idea what they were walking into. Status, he ordered. A young officer, Lieutenant Kara Ivers, straightened beside him. Despite the soot and blood smeared across her uniform, her voice remained steady. They had trained for this. They had waited for this. Enemy fleet in low orbit. Scanners indicate deployment of ground troops within the hour. No planetary bombardment, she hesitated. Voss glanced at her. Speak. They want prisoners. A cold silence settled over the command room. Prisoners. Not survivors. Specimens. Voss exhaled slowly. The Tribunal's extermination order had been absolute, but curiosity was a dangerous thing. The aliens still didn't understand why humanity had refused to die quietly. Why, even after orbital bombardments, after bioplagues and nuclear winters, Earth refused to kneel. They were here to dissect the answer. Let them come, Voss said, turning back to the display. He tapped a control, revealing the real battlefield. The Tribunal saw only ruins and scattered resistance cells. What they didn't see was the labyrinth beneath the rubble. For years, humanity had reshaped its own graveyard. Collapsed cities were now kill zones. The underground metro lines? Tunnels of death. Crippled satellites? Still watching, still listening. Earth was no longer a home. It was a trap. A sharp beeping cut through the tension. Incoming transmission. The signal was clear, arrogant in its brazenness. Human resistance, a voice echoed through the bunker's speakers, smooth and calculating. Chancellor Valkyries 9. Your defiance has been impressive. But it ends here. Surrender, and you will be granted mercy. Resist, and your suffering will be the last memory of your kind. A pause. The Tribunal expected fear. Pleading. Desperation. Voss chuckled. It was a quiet sound, almost amused. Then he pressed the comm button and replied, "You should have sent more ships." Silence. Then the transmission cut. Ivers let out a breath. That got his attention. Good, Voss said. Now let's show them what extinction really looks like. The first strike. The Tribunal's drop ships descended in sleek formation, scanning the surface for hostiles. They found none. The scanners swept over dust-covered streets, skeletal buildings, the ghosts of a civilization long erased. It was too quiet. Then the ground exploded beneath them. Phase 1. Hidden missile batteries, powered by scavenged alien tech, erupted from beneath the rubble, cutting through the sky with white-hot vengeance. The first wave of drop ships never even touched the ground. Fireballs replaced them. Twisted metal rained down like a second apocalypse. The surviving ships veered wildly, deploying combat units mid-air. Troops in exosuits, insectoid warforms, bioengineered shock troops bred for planetary domination. They hit the ground running, only to vanish as the streets collapsed beneath them. Phase 2. The Tribunal's elite forces, bred for every known terrain, had never trained for a battlefield that swallowed them whole. Pitfalls. Imploding tunnels. Remote-activated building collapses. The very earth beneath their feet turned against them. The first few minutes were chaos. Confused orders, desperate calls for reinforcement, biosignatures blinking out faster than command could register. Then came the real nightmare. Phase 3. The Tribunal's surviving squads tried to regroup, but they were already being hunted. Silent figures emerged from the ruins, humans in makeshift armor, wielding weapons stolen from the very enemies that had tried to exterminate them. Close-quarters combat. Blades through chitin. Shotguns against exoplates. The Tribunal fought back with superior tech, but humanity fought with something else. Rage. These weren't civilians, desperate and starving. These weren't broken survivors, begging for life. These were warriors who had already died once. And they refused to die again. The Galactic Tribunal's first mistake. On board the Tribunal's command ship, Valkyrie's 9 watched in stunned silence. The battlefield below was supposed to be a formality. A finishing blow. Instead, it was a massacre, but not the one he had envisioned. This isn't possible, one of his officers stammered, watching as entire platoons were erased from the display. Valkyrie's 9's gaze darkened. Withdraw ground forces. Prepare orbital bombardment. A murmur of hesitation. One of his admirals, a creature with sapphire-hued skin, shifted nervously. Chancellor, the directive has changed, Valkyrie's 9 snapped. No more prisoners. No more studies. Erase them. It was the logical decision. Humanity was a mistake that should have been purged from the stars long ago. He would not let them become anything more than a cautionary tale. But as his ships repositioned, preparing to unleash a second planetary annihilation, something changed. New signals flared across their scanners. Unfamiliar ones. Valkyrie's 9 frowned. What is that? A nearby officer's claws tapped frantically against the controls, eyes widening in disbelief. Sir, it's coming from the wreckage. From old Terran warships. Valkyrie's 9's breath caught. Those ships were dead. Corpses floating in Earth's orbit, long abandoned. Drifting ruins. Yet now, their systems were activating. One by one, ancient Terran warships powered up, their weapons locking onto the Tribunal's fleet. Valkyrie's 9's blood ran cold. Humanity had been playing dead. And now, the ghosts were waking up. The Tribunal fleet had come to finish off a dead world. Instead, they had awakened something they didn't understand. A graveyard was stirring. Valkyrie's 9 stood rigid on the command deck of his flagship, staring at the tactical display. The orbital battlefield, once silent, now pulsed with the glow of Terran warships reactivating. Wreckage that had drifted lifeless for years was now humming with power. Old codes, long thought obsolete, surged through ancient systems. How? One of his officers stammered. Valkyrie's 9's mandibles tightened. Because humanity never truly dies. Beneath the surface of Earth, deep in the Resistance bunker, Commander Adrian Voss watched the same chaos unfold. The plan had worked. Their enemy had assumed the derelict Terran fleet orbiting Earth was nothing more than debris. But for years, the Resistance had been working in the shadows, feeding power into the wrecks, reactivating dormant AIs, restoring just enough to make them functional. They weren't fully operational ships, but they didn't have to be. They only needed to fire. Target priority, command vessels, Voss ordered. Through hastily restored systems, the dead ships responded. Rusted cannons adjusted. Discolored plasma coils hummed weakly. The last remnants of humanity's fallen navy turned their weapons toward the Tribunal's fleet. And then, they opened fire. The shock of a lifetime. Valkyrie's 9's fleet was not prepared for resistance. Explosions tore through their ranks. Old, outdated human railguns, barely functioning, still punched through shields with brute force. tribunal formations collapsed as dead ships woke up with one final purpose: to kill. The enemy fleet scrambled, breaking apart, trying to analyze the situation, but no amount of calculations could explain the sheer ferocity of a species fighting from the grave. Aboard his ship, Valkyrie's 9 snarled, slamming a clawed fist against his console. This was not supposed to happen. "Admiral," one of his officers shouted. "We've lost 3 carriers. Regroup." Valkyries barked. "Destroy those ships." "Sir, they aren't even piloted," the officer blurted out. "Most of their systems are running on half power, some aren't even moving." But, he hesitated, looking at his display. "They don't care if they take damage. They're just firing at anything they can hit." That was the horror of it. The tribunal's fleets were built on precision, on logic, on tactical superiority. But they were fighting something that didn't care about dying, because it was already dead. Voss leaned forward in his chair, listening as reports poured into his earpiece. His people, hidden underground, were watching history rewrite itself. "Sir," Ivers said beside him, voice sharp with excitement, "the tribunal is scattering. Their formations are breaking. The derelicts are taking down their rear guard." "Good," Voss said. "Now let's cut off their head. The betrayer." But deep within the resistance, there was a traitor. In a sealed chamber below the bunker, Elias Reese, a former Terran officer, worked frantically at a hidden console. His fingers trembled over the keyboard as he entered an encrypted frequency. "To tribunal forces," he whispered, "this is your contact. You need to strike now, before it's too late." He had been promised safety. He had been promised a place among the survivors. The tribunal had sworn they would spare him in exchange for intelligence. What he failed to understand was that the tribunal did not offer mercy. The moment he transmitted his signal, the tribunal ship above received it. Valkyrie's 9's mandibles twitched as he listened to the incoming message. "A human turncoat. Pathetic." "Good," he murmured. "Deploy the suppression forces. End this charade." The counterattack. From the darkness of space, something new emerged. Unlike the tribunal's standard warships, sleek, white-hulled, elegant, these ships were black, angular, built for suppression. Elite forces. Valkyrie's personal executioners. They moved swiftly, bypassing the chaos of the main battle, descending toward Earth with one purpose: destroy the resistance bunker. Voss barely had time to react. "Enemy craft inbound, new signatures." Ivers shouted. "How many?" Voss demanded. "A dozen, maybe more. They're not engaging the fleet, they're heading straight for us." Voss's gut twisted. This wasn't random. This was coordinated. Someone had given them the bunker's exact location. He grabbed his rifle from the rack beside him. "We're compromised." Ivers blinked, startled. "Sir?" "We have a traitor," Voss growled. "Get every soldier ready. If they want to fight, we'll give them one." The fall of the bunker. The tribunal strike teams hit the underground stronghold with terrifying precision. Explosive charges tore through reinforced steel. Breach teams flooded the corridors, moving like liquid shadows, weapons raised. But the resistance wasn't unprepared. Gunfire erupted the moment the aliens entered. Humans, hardened by years of war, fought tooth and nail, grenades bursting through the narrow corridors, makeshift turrets spitting fire. Voss moved fast, leading a counteroffensive through the halls. He fired with brutal efficiency, each shot finding a mark. His soldiers followed, pushing back against the tribunal's best. But then, the power grid flickered. The bunker shook violently. Over the comms, a voice crackled, "Sir, the reactors." Then an explosion rocked the base. Voss was thrown against the wall. Dust and metal rained down as alarms screamed through the corridors. "They're sabotaging the power core." Ivers shouted, gripping a rifle. "If they breach it, we lose everything," Voss finished grimly. Valkyrie's 9 watched from orbit, expression unreadable. The human resistance had fought well. Too well. But even a cornered predator could only last so long. Crush them, he ordered coldly. The escape. Deep in the bunker, Voss coughed through the smoke. The corridors were collapsing. The entire stronghold was coming down. He grabbed Ivers by the arm. We need to go. Now. But sir. No arguments, he snapped. Rally who we can and get to the surface. They moved fast, dodging falling debris, cutting down the last of the tribunal shock troops in their path. By the time they reached the final exit, only a handful of resistance fighters remained. Voss turned back once, just once, to see the bunker crumbling behind him. The last human stronghold, the place where Earth had made its final stand, was gone. But they weren't dead. Not yet. As they emerged into the ruins of Old Manhattan, Voss looked up. The battle in orbit was still raging. Their AI fleet was still fighting. And one last weapon remained. His eyes locked onto the largest derelict ship still floating in space. A Terran dreadnought, partially operational. Voss exhaled. If the tribunal wanted extinction, he would give it to them. Get me a comm link to that ship, he said, voice cold as steel. We're taking it back. The dreadnought hung in orbit like a corpse, a monument to a war lost years ago. Scorched hull plating. Half-melted gun turrets. A ghost ship drifting in the void. But Adrian Voss wasn't here to mourn. Are you telling me that thing still has power? Ivers asked, breathless. The handful of surviving resistance fighters stood behind them, staring up at the ruined warship. Enough to be dangerous, Voss said. He turned to his tech officer. Can you get us aboard? The young woman, Calloway, checked her cracked datapad. I can force a shuttle dock, but there's a problem. Only one? Ivers muttered. Calloway ignored him. The ship's core is cold. Even if we get inside, we'll need time to restart its systems. And we don't know if the main weapons still work. Voss nodded, already making his decision. Then we move. Now. Valkyries 9's fleet was regaining formation. The tribunal was adjusting. They had been caught off guard, but they weren't beaten. And if they finished regrouping, Earth was done. There was no time left. The dreadnought awakens. The tribunal noticed them. As Voss and his team launched toward the derelict warship, Valkyries 9's sensors caught the movement. Admiral, one of his officers reported. Small human craft is approaching the derelict. Valkyries narrowed his eyes. Intercept them. A squadron of tribunal fighters peeled away, streaking toward the human shuttle. Inside, Calloway paled. We've got incoming. Hold course. Voss ordered. Ivers swore under his breath. That's not a plan. It is now. The moment the tribunal fighters locked weapons, a forgotten defense system activated. The dreadnought, dead for years, suddenly fired. Rust-covered turrets jerked to life. A flurry of automated flak fire tore into the tribunal squadron. 2 fighters vanished in explosions, another spun out of control, crashing into debris. The survivors pulled back. Inside the tribunal flagship, Valkyries 9 froze. That ship should be dead, an officer shouted. It wasn't. And now, humanity was inside. The Bridge of Ghosts. The dreadnought was a tomb. As Voss and his team boarded, their boots echoed through darkened halls. Dust floated in zero-G, skeletons and rusted armor lined the corridors. This place is cursed, one soldier muttered. No, Voss said. It's ours. They pressed forward, moving past ruined bulkheads, damaged consoles, shattered glass from long-dead control panels. Then, finally, they reached the bridge. The main control throne stood untouched, facing the stars. Voss placed a hand on the console. The metal was cold. Lifeless. Can you bring it back? He asked Calloway. The tech officer hesitated. Then she nodded. I can try. She worked fast, fingers dancing over keys, forcing old systems to reboot. The ship groaned, ancient servos straining to respond. Screens flickered, struggling to wake. Then, a voice. Designation, TDN Revenant. Status, critical. Core systems offline. Awaiting command. Ivers inhaled sharply. It still knows its name. And it still has fight left, Voss said grimly. Calloway, bring weapons online. The final gambit. Valkyrie's 9 wasn't waiting. His fleet adjusted, positioning themselves for a final planetary bombardment. The moment they fired, Earth would cease to exist. But before he could give the order, a new signal appeared on his tactical display. The Dreadnought. It was broadcasting on all tribunal channels. Voss's voice came through, steady and cold. This is Commander Adrian Voss of the Terran Defense Navy. Valkyrie's 9's claws twitched. You thought we were gone, Voss continued. You thought you could wipe us from history. But you failed. Because humanity doesn't die. We endure. Valkyries narrowed his eyes. Open fire. The tribunal fleet unleashed a storm of energy weapons. Beams of searing light streaked toward the dreadnought. And the Revenant answered. The Revenant's vengeance. The dreadnought came alive. Its main railgun, silent for years, fired. The kinetic slug punched through the tribunal flagship's shields like paper. Valkyrie's 9 barely had time to react before his starboard wing erupted into fire. Damage to primary core, an officer shrieked. The tribunal fleet tried to reposition, but the Revenant wouldn't stop. Calloway worked furiously at the controls. Bringing secondary batteries online. Gun turrets turned, targeting the tribunal's capital ships. One by one, they died. The end of Valkyrie's 9. Valkyrie's 9 refused to accept it. This is impossible, he roared. His fleet was crumbling. His ships were being torn apart by a single warship. Voss watched from the Revenant's bridge. His grip on the console tightened. Target the tribunal flagship, he said. End this. The railgun charged. The entire ship shook as the final round loaded. Valkyrie's 9's eyes widened. Then, silence. The railgun fired. Valkyrie's 9's flagship was obliterated. The tribunal fleet, leaderless, broke apart. Some fled. Some were torn down by the Revenant's guns. The rest burned. The aftermath. The battle was over. Voss stood on the dreadnought's bridge, staring at the battlefield. The tribunal had come to end humanity. Instead, they were the ones erased. Ivers exhaled. We actually did it. Calloway grinned, exhausted. That was one hell of a gamble. Voss didn't smile. The war wasn't over. The tribunal still existed. And they would come back. But next time, humanity wouldn't be broken. Next time, they would be ready. Voss placed a hand on the console. The Revenant was theirs now. Set course, he ordered. We're taking the fight to them. As the last warship of Earth turned toward the stars, humanity's war for survival had just begun.